I'm going to let our storytellers introduce themselves because they will do a far better job than I. But to start us off, I'm just going to ask that everyone up on the stage with me tell us just the short and sweet who you are, what your role at your organization is, and where you're based geographically. So I'll kick it off, and I'll say I'm Leah Cuddeback. I work for the Hill Country Alliance as a storytelling and public engagement manager, like Catherine just said, and we're based in Dripping Springs and serve the 17 counties of the Hill Country. Can y'all hear me in the back? Okay, I'll try to talk better into the mic. All right, and now I'll pivot to you, Juan. So if you want to introduce yourself.
All right, mic check. Can y'all hear me in the back? What's up? Hola, comunidad. My name is Juan Martinez. I am the Senior Program Manager at the Aspen Institute. We are an international organization addressing the world's most pressing challenges by bringing people together. I am currently based out of Blanco, Texas, descendant of the Zapotec people of the Istmus of Tehuantepec, born in Mexico City, grew up in South Central LA, and yes, I am from California and now in Texas.
You admit it. Good morning. My name is Maria Rocha, and I'm a member of the Miacan Garza tribe. It's a Coahuiltecan people. It's a state-recognized tribe of Texas. For the past 16 years, I was executive director of Indigenous Cultures Institute, which is a nonprofit that's based in San Marcos. I've since retired, and I'm now serving on the board of elders of this nonprofit.
Hi, I'm Katy Baldock. I'm a producer with Fin and Fur Films, which is based in Austin. We're a film production company that makes wildlife movies, both documentary and natural history, short films and features, and really excited to be here today. And there's a lot of people that we've worked with on our films before. I'm excited to be on this panel.
Good morning, everyone. Vanessa Torres. I am the Program Manager of Interpretation, Education, and Community Engagement for Lyndon B. Johnson National Historical Park and Waco Mammoth National Monument. We're based here out of Johnson City and Stonewall, Texas. And I actually live in Blanco, Texas as well. And in all transparency, Juan is my husband. So happy to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. And I think beyond just saying who we are, where we work, it's important to recognize in a storytelling panel that we all come here with our own stories. So beyond who you work, I would love to hear a little bit more about your perspective and what a unique perspective you bring to your organization is. So tell us a little bit about your story and your perspective and how it influences your work.
So at the Aspen Institute, I run two portfolios of our work. One of them is called Fresh Tracks, a project that I founded that centers the healing power of culture and the outdoors for civic action. And through that, really what we try to break down is the silos that culture can sometimes impose on each other, the misunderstanding, the misconnections, or the assumptions that may be lying in there that can sometimes impact who we are and how we come together to address some of the biggest challenges that are impacting all of us in the same way. Conservation, climate change, lack of access to equal health care, all these things can sometimes be addressed if we just talk to each other and come to the table as a community, and that's what we try to create through Fresh Tracks. The other part of my portfolio is working with Native and Indigenous communities across the country to uplift their priorities, which for many of our tribal partners, it is data sovereignty. How do they maintain control of their own information and not be used upon or extracted upon? And then also how to access post-secondary education in rural and tribal communities. And so those are some of the things that I work. My story, though, how I got there, how does a National Geographic explorer, how does a recent Murray Award recipient with Jane Goodall end up on this stage in the middle of Texas from South Central LA? It starts in South Central LA, where I grew up. My parents both come from rural communities in Mexico, and they migrated to Mexico City to find work. So migration is very much a part of my DNA as well, too. And then we moved up to LA, where I grew up as a kid running around the streets of South Central, not really knowing where my future was going to lead to. And I ended up in detention. And in detention, they gave me an ultimatum that said, either you stay in detention, and you know where this ends up in, or you go to this thing called Eco Club. And Eco Club turned out to be the best thing in my life. Ms. Glenda Pepin, now one of my dearest friends, and I call her a second mother to me, is part of the reason why I'm doing what I do. I found enough of my love, enough of my heart and soul in the middle of these hills and mountains and trees, because I knew that out here the trees don't ask you where you're from. The tree certainly does not ask you your bank account number, and the mosquitoes, as everyone knows, do not care who you are. They will take what they need, and I really believe that nature and the open outdoors provides an equal playing field for all of us to come together and build those connections to each other. And that's how I ended up here.
Thank you. Beautiful. Let me build on that, because my perspective is really the perspective of our community. And our perspective is that we're all related. And as you say, the whole planet, Mother Earth is one sentient being to us. And so we feel that that's what we need to teach our youth. That's what we need to build our future on, that type of sentiment and that type of coming together of everyone around that concept. So our programming at the Institute includes a powwow that's happening this weekend, October 1st and 2nd, where we gather communities of Indigenous people to celebrate together. And our purpose is to educate people that we are still here as Indigenous communities in Texas, and that we still have a rich and deep culture that we want to share with people, and that culture embraces the concept of Mother Earth and her precious nature to all of us. So our perspective is carried over in our youth programming. We have a week-long encounter where we teach our children about the precious nature of the land and the water. All the land is sacred, all the water is sacred. And we teach them about the specific area where they live and how they are responsible for that area of land and water and air. And we have ceremonies to teach them that information and bring them to the water and have them actually touch the water and connect with it. We have a language program where we're teaching our people, we're re-implementing all of that knowledge of our sacred language that has in it those ideas and concepts about the sacredness of the land and how to be in balance in the natural way with the land. We have a teachers program where we're certifying teachers to learn how to teach through an Indigenous pedagogy so that you can go to the classroom and have science and art and math and English and all of that taught in a holistic way through one lesson in the natural way. So our programming is our perspective of our existence here. We're all related. The earth, the mosquitoes. We're all related because Mother Earth is just one being, and we're part of that.
I think with Fin and Fur and the production company, one of the unique perspectives that we're able to do is try and bridge the gap between scientific knowledge and public perception of scientific information. We are very fortunate to work with a lot of incredible biologists across the state, some of which are here today, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them sharing their knowledge with us. But unfortunately, a lot of times there's those studies that they are doing and what they know about wildlife and ecosystems in Texas isn't always accessible to the public, whether it's in scientific papers that you have to pay to get access to, or even if you have access to it, it's not particularly enjoyable to read for the average person. So being able to work with them and have these conversations about what they are studying and what are the facts about the state of wildlife and landscapes in our state, and be able to take that and portray it in a way that is both engaging and easy for people to understand, allows us to create empathy for these places and these ecosystems and wildlife and inspire action. If people don't understand what the situation is, then they won't feel compelled to protect it. And I think it's really exciting that we get to work with these nonprofit organizations and biologists and help tell their stories in a way that people can really digest.
So my perspective, I work for the National Park Service. Growing up in rural Texas, I grew up just at the edge of the hill country in a little town called Hondo. You may know it. And growing up in Hondo, town is at that time about 7,000 people. My dad is from there. My grandma still lives there and some family. I absolutely hated it. My dad, growing up there, had this love for nature, coming out into woods like this, hiking, fishing. He instilled that love of nature in us growing up. But we were part of the segregated South, right? The former segregated South. That mentality still continued in that town. And going through from elementary to high school, I was told by my college counselor, you need to join the military. That's the only way you're going to be able to afford college. And if it wasn't for, my first grade teacher who continued to advocate, and I continue to stay in touch with her today, that you can do whatever you want. You can be whoever you want. And I ended up going to St. Mary's University here in San Antonio, earned a bachelor's and a master's from there. And it was during that time that, I think I was a sophomore at the time, I ran across a table with this arrowhead and people with a funny hat. And they were like, "Oh, do you like nature?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, I really do. I forgot about that." And they're like, "Well, do you want to come out and work for us and go to Alaska?" And I had never been outside of San Antonio, except for, a couple of road trips with family, but I'd never been on a plane. And I had to actually raise money to be able to buy a round-trip ticket to Alaska, and spent my first summer at Kenai Fjords National Park. And that completely changed my perspective and my outlook in what I was going to do when I graduated. And I fell in love with the Park Service. I fell in love with being able to connect people with nature like my dad had done with me when we were little. And being able to now, as a supervisory park ranger, overseeing all our visitor services for both parks, for Lyndon B. Johnson and Waco Mammoth, being able to be that catalyst for kids that are coming to our parks and connecting people that are coming, because I didn't realize I had been to national parks in second grade, and I had actually come to the Texas White House in that little bus, at that time when Lady Bird Johnson was still alive. And it wasn't until I came back into this job, and I always vowed that I was never going to come back to Texas, and here I am. And it's been a great reminder of what this place is and the impact of the Hill Country had on me. And so I'm happy to share that and try to share that with the kids and our visitors that come, and to try to make our place relevant to them. Because a lot of times, kids, especially as they're getting more diverse, this new generation, don't see themselves in places like us, don't see themselves on this stage. And so if we can do that to every visitor, to those kids in schools, I think we're accomplishing our goals.
Thank you all for those really wonderful answers. It gives us all a window more into who you are as people and how that affects your work. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to go to Maria now, because Maria, you've talked about your work with the Indigenous Cultures Institute, and I think we all know that Indigenous cultures have a long history of storytelling as a tradition. I also know that this is a story that is often not connected with conservation. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about storytelling in your culture and in how this connects to conservation in the Hill Country today.
Well, I'm going to start by telling you that here in Texas, there are over 11 million people who are labeled Hispanic. And of those, we estimate about 10 million, most of them, are actually indigenous people, people who have ancestors that are of this land here in Texas. So our story goes back at least 14,000 years, according to archaeologists, but according to our people, it goes back to the very beginning. In the beginning, when there was the upper world and the lower world, we didn't exist as human beings. We were in the lower world as spirits. And we came up onto Mother Earth through a portal that's located in San Marcos, Texas. And that story is our creation story that's documented on a rock art painting near Comstock, Texas. It was painted by our people, and it's carbon dated to be 4,000 years old. The rock art painting is called today the White Shaman Mural, but we call it Napako, our journey. Paco, journey, na, our. So Napako shows for us the greatest story ever told, how we, the people, emerged onto Mother Earth, Taptayi. And that story is what we create or recreate every time we have a ceremony. We have an all-night ceremony that we perform at all the equinoxes and solstices to celebrate our culture and to reconnect with Mother Earth. So the panel shows elements of our creation story, like the upper world and the lower world, divided by a white line. It shows the deer that led our people out from the underworld and onto Taptayi, Mother Earth. It shows the coming together of a human being and the deer and peyote buds, which is our medicine. It shows the 4 sacred springs of Texas, where our people actually documented that there are 4 fountain springs on this land here, Texas. And it shows that on the second spring, it's Barton Springs, San Marcos Springs, Comal Springs, and San Pedro Springs in San Antonio, that we came out of the second spring, which is the sacred springs. So that story is what we've been practicing in ceremony for thousands of years. And that's the story that I think connects all of us together, because we are all now living on that land where human beings emerged for the first time. So we are all living on sacred land, this hill country, the springs all throughout Texas. All this land was populated by those original Texas Indians, those original people of this land. And so we all have that in common, right? We're all now the stewards of that ancient story.
Thank you. And that's still something we see today. I think the point that we're all now engaged in that stewardship, I think a lot of the folks in the room are probably land managing on their own land. And that is a part of that story that continues on. Vanessa, you are an educator in a historical park. You have lots of experience working in the state park system. And I think this history that Maria is telling us is not necessarily always a history that we're told when we go to our national parks. It's not something you necessarily learn at school. I'm really interested in how your work at LBJ National Historical Park and at Waco Mammoth National Monument, how does that work continue to keep the life of a former president relevant in today's day and age, and to connect to different histories that maybe we haven't always been talked about or told?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just bouncing off of what Maria's connection to nature and the the culture connection to nature. National parks, we tend not to tell that story. We tend to be very focused in on, Lyndon B. Johnson, 36th president, spent a quarter of his time here in the Texas White House. And that's great, and that's the core of our story. And when I first got here 2.5 years ago, I had an employee tell me, we have the Johnson Settlement. If you've never been out to the Johnson Settlement there, it's the place where his grandparents founded and settled there. And the first story I was told, and I'm embarrassed to tell you this, the first story I was told by one of my staff was, that his grandmother hid underneath the dog trot cabin because the Comanches came and raided them. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But why do you think they came and raided them? Could it be that they stole their land? He was like, oh, I never thought about that. And that's the part of the story. As the Park Service, we're now trying to tell the full story, the full narrative of the why, and to tell that full cycle of story, and for people to see their own selves in that place. Because, yes, this is the home of the 36th president, this is the LBJ Ranch, but before that, there were people who also cared for this land that brought us to where we're at today. And so being able to see that, and for kids to understand where their food comes from and understand, where their ancestors came from is important to continue to protect these places that belong to all of us. And so it is extremely difficult. If anybody has a trick of how to continue to make a 36th president relevant, to continue to make fossils that were over 8,000 years old relevant, please come see me. But I think it's just connecting people being able to see themselves. We do it through education, educational programs, going out into schools, distance learning programs, and just being able now to train our staff to tell that full story, and for us ourselves to hold ourselves accountable to all people, and being able to for folks to see themselves there.
Thank you. So Vanessa spoke a little bit about the education aspect, right? And working with youth in the outdoors is something that I have a background in. I actually used to work just down the street at Shield Ranch in their summer camp, El Ranchito. So thinking about that and my own background, I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more from Juan about your work to connect youth to the outdoors. I think that is the most inspiring thing that I've ever gotten to do, and I'm interested to know just a little bit more about your experience with the Aspen Institute, maybe with Fresh Tracks, and how you can kind of work in that realm to bridge divides. I know you mentioned a lot of the youth you work with are from really rural communities, and a lot of the youth that the folks here work with are from really rural communities as well, or very urban communities. So we kind of get both here in the Hill Country, right at the crossroads of that rural-urban divide. And I'd be really interested in just hearing a little bit of your wisdom.
Yeah. Thanks. Let's see. I've been doing youth leadership development work for the last 20 years of my life, ever since I took that promise to myself when I was visiting Grand Teton National Park for the first time. A kid from South Central LA going from the city, all of a sudden getting dropped off in the middle of Grand Teton National Park. Has anybody ever been to Grand Teton National Park? Yeah. Okay, healthy amount of people. You know that those mountains, once you see them, it's like, whew. And I fell in love, and I found my tree, a friend now that I go see almost every other year in that place. And I also have my nopal back home in South Central LA. And those two connections, connecting those two dots, those two very special places, those two very special communities and people for me, was important to try to translate that as much as I could across whatever I could do for the rest of my life. And that's taken me in different ways to dedicating 10 years with the Children in Nature Network and creating their Natural Leaders Network, which has a strong representation here in Texas. Texas always was the first one to raise their hand and say, yes, we want to do this. And then going on to create Fresh Tracks with the Aspen Institute. I think the beauty about working with the younger generation is that I have to check myself all the time about understanding my assumptions or my way of thinking, and recognizing that they have an amazing and innovative way of seeing life, and how this generation approaches conservation is going to look very different than ours. My responsibility is to bestow that legacy upon them and say, this is the legacy that you're carrying on, a legacy that it's been strong through leaders like Maria, leaders like Wendell Berry, leaders like Lyndon B. Johnson, who signed the 1964 Wilderness Act. Those are the legacies that have helped us get to this point. Now it's time for you to carry this legacy forward and create a legacy in your own way. And that legacy of the land, I think, is a beautiful concept that brings everyone to the table. I have yet to find a legislator or a decision maker in the community that will say no to kids going out to fish, or no to a child building their own treehouse for the first time, right? And those memories, those moments are becoming less and less frequent in our communities, regardless of whether you're rural or urban or suburban. Those moments are harder to find because what do we know about kids now? They automatically gravitate to the nearest plug, right? The nearest outlet is safety. We know that the U.S. Surgeon General has given us a warning about this generation and the generation coming behind it, that they will have the highest obesity rate in history. We know that for the first time, human survivorship is being reduced. For so many years, we've been able to increase that age and get people to live longer, but nowadays that age number is going down. Some of the theory, what I carry, is by Richard Louv, nature deficit disorder. How many of you have heard that word? Yeah. Rich is a great friend and mentor. And when he and I sat down and talked about nature deficit disorder, I said, great, that's something that we've all, you put a tagline on something that we've all felt and know in our bones. Now, how do we start to create solutions towards it? And the way that shows up for me is by really empowering those closest to the pain, closest to the power and solution. And that is the young people of this generation. And what I have found is that when you're able to bring someone from Appalachia, rural white, with a kid from South Central LA, you find and break bread and bring them together in the great outdoors, you find that they have more in common than they have in difference. And those kind of moments when a kid from South Central LA understands the pain of a kid in Appalachia and what they're trying to do by focusing on the future of their community, and vice versa, when a kid from Appalachia cares about a kid from South Central LA, that's the magic moment where I think we can get to. And a lot of what you are all doing here through the Hill Country Alliance, I think, is very much raising that awareness and bringing that to the fold. I would love to see a younger crowd next time we get together. But that, I think, is a part of the call to action, that each of us here needs to know who will take our job. Each of us here needs to know who it is that we're mentoring, that we're supporting to take our job. Rule number one of my golden rule has been to work myself out of a job. That means that I need to make sure that there's someone right behind me ready to take it on. And that's my encouragement to you all, to think about that as you go back to your organizations, to your work, to your daily life. Start thinking about who is that young person that I can bring in or support or connect with people like myself, Maria, and the rest of this panel to connect to those special places, so that by next year, hopefully, and hopefully y'all will have me back and invite me, we can have a younger crowd. And I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and help figure that out too.
I think that's a really good point. Every year that we have the summit, I want us to have more students, and somehow we have hovered at the same kind of level. We've got a dozen or so that are tuned in virtually, and a handful that are here.
Good looking crowd. Don't get me wrong. You guys are good looking.
But I agree. I think, part of being a successful communicator is knowing that your communication needs to be intergenerational, and that's something that I think is something we all need to strive to work on in the work we do. So take that challenge, and when you go home, think about who could be the next you. Speaking of inspiring children, although maybe they would be less inspired to be the next one of us, but they are inspired by things like ocelots and black bears and Bracken Cave bats flying out in a bat tornado. So some of y'all may have heard there was a documentary that recently came out called Deep in the Heart. Yeah? All right, I think we've got fans here. So Deep in the Heart was a production of Fin and Fur Films, and Katy, as one of the producers on this, first of all, thank you. This is a great resource that we can use to connect youth from a couch, from an airplane when you're watching a movie that you've downloaded, or from a teaching space at a nature center. I think those are experiences that we don't all get the chance to have. We may not all be in the Rio Grande Valley looking at ocelots on a private ranch, but we've got footage now that can inspire another generation. So I kind of am interested, Katy, if you don't mind sharing, in addition to educating, I think that movie, Deep in the Heart, offers some really clear calls to action. And I'm interested to hear how you all found the balance between inspiring and educating and also pushing for change.
Yeah, first off, thank you for the compliments. When in conservation storytelling, it's a really tricky balance to find between making people feel excited about what is here and making them feel hopeless about the state of our conservation. So our goal is always to try and find that balance to where people are excited and want to celebrate what we have here in Texas, but not make them feel so helpless that they don't want to do anything. So as you know, we have so many incredible wildlife stories and landscapes here in Texas, and with Deep in the Heart, we wanted to make a film that celebrated all of those places and the wildlife species. But at this point in our conservation state, telling stories and showing a bunch of pretty pictures and beautiful wildlife species just isn't enough. And we wanted to inspire people to take action on these conservation issues that need attention. Which is a very tough balance to be had sometimes. But with Deep in the Heart, there was kind of a mix of, these really exciting and hopeful stories like the return of the black bear and the incredible Bracken Cave sequence and these beautiful bat emergences that happen every night in the summer. But there's also really pressing and unfortunate stories. An ocelot mom losing her kitten as one of the 100 or so ocelots left in Texas, and mountain lions in West Texas facing persecution. So our goal was to make people feel inspired to protect these places and to take an extra step to get involved in these conservation efforts. So in addition to the film, we also have a Take Action page on the website where people can have resources of all these different organizations to support. We also have education curriculum for 4 of the sequences that's available for free for educators on our website. And our goal is always to, go beyond celebrating all of the great things that are here in Texas and kind of take it an extra step to provide these resources for people to go take action and get involved.
Thank you. So I think we can all agree that sometimes sharing inspiring stories and talking about the beauty of our region can feel overwhelming when we're facing a crisis or when we're reacting to bad news or shouldering another burden that maybe, I mean, even the weight of conservation sometimes can feel a little exhausting, and I don't think I'm alone in feeling that way. I've worked on trail crews before, and I think sometimes the mental load that comes with telling stories that are both inspiring and effective can be heavier than doing physical labor out in the Texas sun in July. And I would love to kind of pause here and ask for a little reset. For fun stuff, when you all are feeling this way, because I hope I'm not the only one that sometimes feels overwhelmed, how do you reset? And do you guys have like a fun song or a deep breath? What do you do when you feel like you need a deep breath reset to kind of restart and come back to your work and have a better spin?
Fun question. How do we reset well-being? That's kind of easy to do in the hill country, and that's the beauty about living in a place like this. Yes, as a Californian, I said that. You can quote me on it. And also realizing that I am a bit of an outsider when it comes to this Texas way of life. But what I have found through, shout out to my anchor, my heart, my rock, Vanessa. She taught me how to hunt. She taught me how to fish. She and her father have taught me how to do this, and getting to go on the trail in Hondo to the swimming hole that he used to go to as a child, and understanding the beauty of that moment, of what that means. I carry that with me, and I hope that when Alejandro, our 8-month-old, is old enough, that we can take him to that same swimming hole. And that's why this work is so important to me at a personal level, is because I want my son to be able to enjoy that legacy of what his grandfather was able to pass down, and for other children to have those moments in swimming holes that their grandfathers swam in. And those are the kind of moments that I think make it great. When, shout out to Jester King, this is the first lunch that we had outside of our house when we had our baby. So Jester holds a very special place to our heart as well too, because this is like our first meal where we weren't like, if you've had a child, you know what those first few months are like. It's kind of all of a fog, but that moment here, sitting at the dining hall and being able to enjoy our first meal together as a family was beautiful, and what amazing background to be able to do that in as it is here in Chester. And then for the song, so humble brag. There is a documentary about Vanessa and I's wedding. It's called Love in the Tetons. It was created in celebration of the centennial of the National Parks Service. But there was also a band called the National Parks that wrote a song for that movie in our honor called Love in the Tetons.
As we ran.
Oh, As We Ran, sorry. As We Ran. As I like to describe Vanessa, she is my better 3/4 and holds 3/4 of the knowledge of our relationship. So, As We Ran by National Parks is a song that I go to. Highly recommend it to anybody who wants to check out some new music. They are great.
Okay. Well, I'd like to share a very sad story that's had us depressed for a while, and that is that we're trying to acquire 3 remains of our ancestors that were unearthed from Hays County and are being kept in cardboard boxes at the University of Texas in a warehouse on the J.J. Pickle campus. So we've been fighting for 6 years to try to get those ancestors reburied. So lately we've been celebrating the second year of a promise that President Hartzell made that he would return those remains. And so far, 2 years have gone by, and that's been a big bummer. So when we pray together, we go outside. Typically, at sunrise is the best time to go out and pray because the rising sun gives off certain types of rays during that time, and those rays are healing rays. So if you go out and pray at that time, that's the best way. And our prayers are songs, so we sing our special songs. And a song that I composed so that I teach the children about the water and how it's sacred, it's called Naham Kam Mahewakyana. We will remember the sacred springs. So that song heals my soul because I'm connected to the waters, right? Naham Kam Mahewakyana, Naham Kam Mahewakyana, Naham Kam Mahewakyana.
I don't think I can top that. It's kind of all over the place as far as music for wanting to reset or get energized, but I always like to go out to West Texas in the Big Bend region whenever I need to reset, get energized. I'm feeling overwhelmed from work and being in Austin for too long. I like to go out there, and it's nice that there's hardly service in a lot of places, so you're kind of forced to disconnect. And typically whenever I'm out in that area, I listen to a lot of folk music of all sorts, new and old. And I don't have like one specific band or song, but generally that's kind of the overall scene of when I need to get energized and inspired and reset.
I think for me, there's a couple of things. It's hard to come home from a really hard day and not smile when your 8-month-old sees you and just gives you this little gummy grin with his 2 little teeth. And then he also has this thing where he just screams right now, so that's fun. So I think that's one way to just reset your day when you come home from a bum day. But gardening for me, going back outdoors and putting my hands in the dirt is important and an important way for me to reset. And then in regards to music, Lizzo. If you haven't heard, she just played like a president's glass flute like at one of her recent concerts, which is amazing, and I'm sure had all the curators sweating. But I think anything Lizzo, there's a song where there's a lyric that says "Boss up and change your life," and for me, I actually have that quote on my email. For me, just taking ownership, that personal responsibility, and how are you going to take that next step? And that's something for me that I think just inspires me to continue to do what I do.
Thank you. So we are almost out of time. I'm going to say we've got like 2 minutes actually left. So 2 minutes, final thing. I think everyone here has a story to tell, and we want folks to leave here feeling emboldened to tell your own story and also feeling inspired by what you've heard today. So if you could share one call to action from your organization, your work, your passions, please share it now.
Don't underestimate the power of your own story. All of us have a story. There's a reason you're here today, doing what you do and caring about what you care about. Pass that on and listen to the story that comes from the other side as well, too.
Honor the relationships that we all have together and understand that that relationship includes Mother Earth.
Piggybacking off of that, focusing on community and our common goal. A lot of times we see these controversies of getting caught up in disagreements and little details, but in most scenarios, we have this common goal of caring for our land and our landscapes and nature, and just keeping that focus and finding that commonality.
Encourage the next generation, those coming behind you, to step outside of their comfort zone and disconnect from their phone and visit a national park or state park or even just your local park back home. And just a quick shout out that we have a teacher's workshop coming up to do place-based education. So if you're interested in that, Hill Country Alliance has my information.
And I think I will share one additional final call to action. And for me, I think taking it a step beyond, if you know somebody that is younger and getting started in a career, offer to help them with their resume. That is something that people need help with. And if you've ever hired someone, then you probably have more experience than a kid who's fresh out of high school or college. So that's my other takeaway. And I think we are out of time. Do we have time for one question? Okay, so let's see. Here, can you pass this to somebody who has a question?
I can. Who has a question?
Could you tell us something about Eco Club?
Yeah, Eco Club was a program in South Central LA that brought actually rival gang territories of schools together. And it was started by these two school teachers through a grant by a journalist couple, Beverly Johnson and Mike Hoover, who were there during the LA riots, and they lived in Jackson Hole. And as they were interviewing kids in South Central LA for the riots, they realized like many of these kids had never been to a place like Jackson. And so they seed granted this program that now has grown into an amazing network of gardens all across LA Unified School District. There's a salad dressing that is made, so there's entrepreneurship built into the Eco Club model. There's environmental education, place-based education. There's trips coming out to knowing where your water comes from in California. So that's a little bit about Eco Club in the way that I knew it. I know that there's so many Eco Clubs across the country. Shout out to Cibolo Nature Preserve here, who does amazing work. I've worked and collaborated with them a bunch, and their little, not little, but the Roadrunner bus that brings at West Cave. At West Cave and Cibolo. Well, and yeah, that's West Cave. Yes, thank you. And Cibolo out the other way. So a lot of great work happening here as well too.
Thanks, y'all. All right, I think, are we out of time now? I'm seeing okay, we got one more. Sweet. If we've got one more. If not, I've got one.
Maria, this question is for you. I'm wondering how Hill Country landowners in this area can help with the work of the Board of the Elders.
Thank you. Landowners is a challenge because here in Texas, over 80% of the land is owned by people instead of the government. So it presents a special challenge for us. But I think we have to remember that landowners are human beings, just like all of us, and that they have a reverence for creation and for prayer and for family and for love, and so we have a lot in common with them. I think that it surprised some environmental friends that we have that I would even mention spirituality as a way that we could approach the landowners. But I have a lot of faith in that concept, and I think that that's something that shouldn't be dismissed just because ownership means money, means profit, means property. I think we shouldn't dismiss the idea that we can approach people at a spiritual level and make a difference that way.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all. Well, I think we're going to wrap right now so we can get ready for our next presentation. But I want to just say thank you all so much for joining us for this panel and for starting our day with such an inspiring note.